Hi, my name is Shaniqua Joy, and I'm the host of Harman, Kardon, Inspired by Sound. Today, I'm here with DJ, broadcaster, and integrative psychotherapist, Nemone Metaxas. Welcome, Nemone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Shaquille.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm very excited too. You have always had a fascination for sound and music, and I was wondering where that came from. Is there something specific before we get into the depth of your work?
Where did it all start?
Yes, exactly, basically.
Well, it's interesting, even as I was coming here, I've just done a show on the radio and I was remembering just how music moves me. I mean, even a track that I've heard hundreds of times. I played Dirty Cash, The Adventures of Stevie V this morning, and I could just feel that kind of want to dance, that moment of experiencing new music and how I felt when I first heard it. And I think that's always been the thing for me. It's a dual realization, I think, about music, in that I noticed sound and heard sounds around me and was just fascinated by that and the effect on me, but also being able to make a sound was really interesting. So being able to play music and see the effect that it had on other people, I think that drew me in as well. I think Dad and I used to listen to the radio when I was really young. I think he sort of soothed me if I couldn't sleep by listening to different tunes. And yeah, I started to kind of feel like this is something that means something to me, and I just want more of it. I couldn't get enough of finding different sounds and hearing different types of music. It's never really been about a genre for me. It's been about, oh my gosh, I love how that sounds. I love how that feels. I want to share it.
Yeah, and also how it makes you feel, probably.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely how it makes me feel. I think it's always moved me to dance, or kind of moved to it, whatever that music is. And I think really early on I realised that perhaps it was another way of communicating with people. So like beyond verbal, I could express myself musically. That's probably my sort of first realization.
Yeah, and it's almost like a love language once you meet people that also sort of gravitate towards this way of communication. And
definitely. Well, there's lots of research to prove that actually if you share the same music taste as people, you're actually going to get on. In fact, there was some research done with college students, and one of their most asked questions when they first met people was, what sort of music do you like? And you can kind of imagine that, can't you? And that they were fairly certain that that would give them a really good indication if they were going to get on with people. And I think, and you feel that when you gather with people and hear the same music that you love, there's something that connects you beyond just the love of that music, maybe.
No, I can definitely relate, because as you said, you're interested in many different genres. I feel the same way. And what I've learned is that I'm very excited about people being excited about music. It's not per se if you like the same music as me. I'm fascinated if someone is like, oh, this is really my type of music, and they know all about it and they can tell me something, specifically if it's something that I haven't explored or heard of. But eventually it turned into your career.
Yeah, I know. How did that happen? Well, I'm very lucky. I don't think I'd ever thought of music as a career choice at all. There was no one in my family who'd done anything music related. I had friends who were DJs, and they were bedroom DJs kind of in the 80s and 90s. And I was always like, oh, I'd really love to be able to do that. But I think really I didn't see a lot of female, women who were DJing. And it's sort of true if you don't see people doing it. It's not that there weren't DJs who were women, but I think they weren't covered as much as the men, and they weren't seen and they weren't visible. So I actually didn't feel like that was necessarily a choice that I could make. But I was collecting music, gathering stuff. And I think when I walked into a radio station for the first time, I'd gone for a job, but it wasn't to be a DJ. I didn't realise I could feel like that. I really felt like I'd landed somewhere at home. It was incredible just to think, oh my God, you can have this as a job. You might be able to earn some money doing this, and I could spend my, every working day in this environment. It was in Manchester. I was clubbing a lot. The music this was Kiss 102 in the kind of early to mid 90s. It was so different to anything else. It felt radical. It was eclectic. We had a techno show. We had an ambient show. Those sort of things hadn't really been accessible to lots of people. And it was like I could dance through my working day. And I think, I honestly couldn't believe how lucky I was. And from then on, it was like, if I can be in this environment, if I can work, this is what I want to do. At first I was working on reception, and then I moved across to learning how the equipment worked, and then eventually to being on air.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Ooh, even like the way, like it makes me emotional the way that you talk about it, because I can imagine how that must. Also, like I think sometimes I'm a little bit sad that I wasn't in my early 20s in the 90s, because I think I would have enjoyed like a lot of music and like discovering it for the first time with everyone else at the same time.
Yeah, it was a really. I feel really lucky to have experienced that time in music, particularly. But there are those times in each of the decades, and when people are growing up, when there's a new genre that feels like something different's happening here. I remember very much the kind of acid house and the feeling that Manchester owned part of this, but there was also another kind of tribe of that sort of variety in London, and but actually it was also very communal, because we shared something about this love of beats and this ability to kind of transcend anything else that was happening, get in a club, get on a dance floor, and have a good time.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny, because like when I introduced you earlier, I also introduced you as an integrative psychotherapist.
You did, yeah.
I'm stumbling over the word.
Yeah, it's not an easy one to say, is it? Yeah. It's integrative psychotherapist. And I can explain. Did you want to know?
Exactly. I was gonna ask if you, first of all, I was curious, because so you just told me like you started out in music, but then this came on later.
So I was actually in Manchester studying psychology. That was my undergraduate degree, and I'd sort of come to that. I think I got into Manchester to do maths, and I was like, I don't think I can spend 3 years doing a maths degree. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. And it was at the time that psychology was definitely on the up, and there was a lot more information and reading. We had one of the best reading lists. But that degree didn't quite scratch the itch of what I was looking for, and I think I was always looking for psychotherapy. And it wasn't really big. It was difficult to find where to study it, actually. And I came to that later on. So I had 20 years in radio before I went back to psychotherapy. I think it took a bit more life experience, a bit more living, having my own family, feeling a bit more grounded. And at that point, I was like, right, I think I can probably look under the bonnet, see what's going on here. I'd always had a fascination with how people get on, what makes them tick, what makes them like certain kinds of music, what makes us feel comfortable with some kind of people, and then you might be in a room, you're like, oh, why do I feel like that, and why do I get on with someone and then I don't get on with them? What's happening there? So I think I was just really interested in human nature, and I couldn't really find the place for that. What I suppose I hadn't realised was what I was doing all the way through my radio career was getting interested in people and helping them tell their story on the radio. So I was interviewing alongside all the playing music, and that seems like that fitted as a pathway towards what I've ended up doing now. So
that was something you already thought of, like because you combined your two interests and passions, basically.
I could never have imagined they would combine, though.
So I kind of like developed as you were going.
Yeah, they were two different. I was on the radio DJing, and I was studying at night school to be a psychotherapist, and they felt very separate. And I was like, even as I went to learn to do psychotherapy, I was like, do you think I can do this? Is this something that you can, I can still be a DJ and I can do this? And very quickly, I think I realised there were kind of parallels, and actually that might work. I suppose the most obvious place that my two worlds cross over is the series I have on Six Music, which is interviewing musicians and DJs and artists about their formative experiences and the music that they've chosen to listen to and how that's impacted where they've ended up today. So that's them crossing over in a more obvious way. There are other ways that it crossed over that I could never have imagined. I've just been to Kendal Mountain Festival and done 3 events with me speaking about the effect of music on our bodies as we listen to music. I'm DJing and I'm playing alongside a string quartet.
Oh, wow.
And then I DJ'd, and then we did the same thing by the lake in Windermere.
Wow.
And it was, and that's only just the beginning of thinking about how the environment affects our listening experience. But so they've started to combine in really unusual ways.
Interesting. And my first part of the question about how you define the term integrative psychotherapist.
Yeah.
I keep saying the word wrong.
No, it's really, it comes from integration. So, and that's really I suppose that explains it. The course that I did involved studying classic psychotherapists, psychoanalysts like Freud, like Klein, like Bion, like Jung, like Winnicott, and they talk about early development and object relations and children's early experiences and how their relationships might play out according to the structures and the way in which that was set up. Attachment theory, and then body psychotherapy. And it's the integration of those kind of elements that means that I am an integrative psychotherapist.
Got it. Okay, wow. And that makes so much sense about what you just also explained about your show being like traveling through someone's life, their childhood, how music impacted them. Now I understand. Okay, beautiful. And basically what you're interested in is the connection between the body, the mind, the well-being, and the way sound impacts that. Yeah. I saw a quote of yours somewhere that said, or I read an article where it stated that, I think you said Stevie Wonder's superstition triggers the fight or flight response in a good way.
I remember saying something like that, I'm sure I did. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more about that? And also, I'm curious about your process when it comes to researching, preparing your shows, finding the right guests. What does that look like?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the kind of Stevie Wonder
and our
fight or flight system. I suppose that came from the idea that we are sense-making beings. We are seeking to make sense of our world. And music, listening to music is no different. As we listen, we're like, oh God, do I recognize this? Does this make sense? Does it feel familiar? And there are familiar patterns in music that kind of meet our expectations. There are also really unfamiliar parts of music that then trigger the brain kind of going, oh my God, what's this? I haven't heard this before. It doesn't sound like this. Or, that wasn't what I was expecting. And I think that's where the fight or flight system is implicated in listening to music. And the example of Stevie Wonder came from one of the programs I made, the very first Journeys in Sound I made, when I was talking to a sound engineer, musician, and neuroscientist, Dr. Daniel Leviton, who'd done... So, I mean, that's a great combination to investigate musical experiences. And he'd really gone deep into Superstition by Stevie Wonder. And I think he was talking about the fact that you could hear a track like that played by, say, a student musician, and you'd hear it and it would sound like Superstition. But you then hear what Stevie Wonder does with that track, and it is completely different. And that's where the brain is in a kind of playground almost, because it's taking on the information of, or listening to, how Stevie Wonder is holding the drumsticks and hitting the drums in a different way, and the angle in which those drumsticks are held makes for a different sound. So that kind of confounds our expectation. And the brain is across all that. It is a massive change detector. It has to be, it always has been. It's, the fight or flight system is very much about keeping us safe. So it's like, does this feel familiar? Does it feel safe? Or do I need to be on high alert? And actually, the brain is, the changes in versions of Stevie Wonder's Superstition are almost imperceptible. So we might not notice that is happening, but subconsciously or unconsciously, our brain is like having a party to a track like that. And it's trying to work out what's happening, whether we like it or not, whether that feels great or, oh my God, it feels a bit different, I didn't expect that. And that's how the fight or flight system is implicated in listening to a track like that.
And then are there also ways, I know that there's certain music that maybe can trigger people, or like that sparks a certain memory that is unpleasant, but is there also specific music then that can like feel healing or have an actual healing effect on the body? Like that was something I always talk to other people before I do any conversation with anyone, just because I'm curious to hear other people's perception, and hear a little bit more about what they would like to know. And someone was like, I wonder, can it have like a healing effect on me?
Yeah, anecdotally, we know that there is music that we prefer and we reach for in certain instances. Most of the artists that I've spoken to on Journeys in Sound, I've asked about a track that they would call their self-care track, or something that, gives them an auditory hug. And we know when there's a track that makes us feel like that. I think, music can soothe and activate the autonomic nervous system, which is the way that our brain makes sense of our experience. And that connects our senses like touch and sound and sight with organs and the brain as well. I think that if we can access that kind of feeling or that sort of soothing effect, which is the parasympathetic nervous system gets activated, then absolutely music can be healing. And we do that anyway without realizing. There are psychotherapists that use playlists with their clients. And we have them anyway in life. You might have a playlist that motivates you to do sport. You might have one that allows you to meditate, exactly. You might have one that allows you to access a feeling of, okay, I feel like I can feel sad to these songs and they're going to hold me in some way. So there's definitely music that has that healing effect.
Yeah, and it also is often linked to memories. I think a lot of music, at least that's how I think of it as well, is something that I connect to a specific memory. And I think a guest of yours on your show mentioned something about sitting in the back of the car of her dad.
Nadine Shah was a guest on the show, and she was talking about listening to tracks in Urdu that her dad was playing in the car when she was little and she was sitting in the back of the car. And actually hearing them again would make her car sick, which is not a great kind of association. She loves that kind of music now, by the way. She was very clear about that. But I think what you're speaking to is the fact that music can transport us, even if the original trigger isn't there, to feeling exactly the same way as we might have done when we had first heard that track. And it is to do with memory. Listening to music is a whole body experience, but it's sort of predicated on perhaps the emotional factors that were around when we first heard the track. So, and that can be laid down and be quite strong. Falling in love, the first music that you hear when you're falling in love, the track that you heard when you're in a breakup, that will have a quite strong emotional association. It's probably worth talking about the reward system here, which is music activates the reward system in the brain. The music that we like activates the reward system. So that includes the limbic and the paralimbic areas of the brain. And that also means our dopamine release when we, it's our kind of reward system. So it'll be the same kind of system that we experience when we're having sex, when we're eating good food, when we're taking recreational drugs, that kind of, and those are quite strong, result in quite strong feelings in the body. And music has a similar kind of effect on us. I mean, nothing lights up an MRI like a person listening to their favourite kind of music. There are so many areas of the brain that are at work and that are affected when we're listening. And what's lovely is we don't really know how it works. We can kind of think about all these different areas lighting up, and that it definitely has an effect in our reward system, like I've said, and it can definitely calm us and our parasympathetic nervous system is involved. But actually, partly it feels like it's still very magical because there's no way of tying that down completely to one answer.
But is that something general, like that everyone experiences, or is that more individual? Because sometimes I talk to other people and I'm like, do you actually feel this music? Like, can you feel what I'm feeling right now?
I think it's really I think there is a lot of individuality about it. I was even a guest that we had on the radio this morning said I didn't used to like music when I was younger, and for me I was like, okay, what's that about? Because it didn't feel like it matched my own experience. And our love or not of music will be connected to the environment that we grew up in and how sound was in the environment that we grew up in. There might be some sounds and music that are very soothing to some people. They might almost be unlistenable to others, and that will be a really individual experience. I mean, I'm thinking, for instance, something like a air conditioning unit or a fridge, or if you've grown up under a flight path or anything, that could be really soothing and feel very familiar.
I have that with the train.
If you've grown up near a house that has, and that can be wonderful and it can feel okay and you might not even notice it. For others, it will be really intrusive. I mean, our environment over the last 200 to 250 years has become much louder, and we are coping with sound on a level that it can be really quite hazardous sometimes. Actually, I was on the tube recently in London, and I could not believe
there are
how loud it was.
Yeah, I remember the first time I stepped onto, because it's not all of the lines, some are more loud, and then I stepped onto one, and I was looking around at everyone why is no one like in shock? Like everyone was just, there were kids just playing around and someone was reading a book and I was like, is this normal?
This is quite loud. Yeah, I mean, obviously it affects some people more than others, but actually they've done studies recently to say that there's, I mean, previous to, say, 200 years ago, we would have been with a background noise of about 35 to 40 decibels, so it was quite chill. We can to 100. So they're really doing a lot of studies at the moment into and into why and how they might kind of regulate that for people, or how people can keep their ears safe, if you like.
But because it feels louder than entering a club even, and when you enter a club, people tell you to put in earplugs, so it doesn't feel normal.
No, it's and the other effect of that is it can put us in a state of fight or flight for a prolonged period of time, and actually that can have health implications. The idea that we might regulate with music and we might be able to find ways to kind of affect our nervous system, to bring it into a lower state, to relax and rest and maybe heal, it makes sense that that could be a good idea.
Yeah, and we also spoke about certain environments, which I'm like interested in, like if there are specific environments or places that kind of help connect to sound and music in a better way, in a healing way. We also, for instance, the story that you told about your guest on the show, being in a car and then having that memory linked to it. Like I have something similar also with cars, where like I sometimes need to listen to new music in the car while driving.
Okay.
Just because I feel like, I don't know, it's weird because I grew up with my mother playing music in the car, having a bunch of CDs around. And then for me, when a new album comes out, like I only fully feel it in my body if I'm like alone in the car or with her and like I'm driving around. It feels like it is kind of an intimate space.
Yeah, and it's almost distraction free, as you say that, isn't it? You've got a lot of the residual noise from our everyday environment that's taken away in a car, so you probably can concentrate and you can hear it in a way that you might not be able to if you're playing it with lots of people.
Yeah, do you have a connection to that as well?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think there's two things in there, isn't there? There's environment, and then I certainly have a connection to for me, it's a connection between music and driving. And I think when I first learned to drive, I would drive my dad's Ford Sierra, or in the late 80s, to the motorway that was near our house, and listen to the music that I wanted to listen to. Loved that kind of
without
feeling
anyone
of
complaining.
Freedom. Well, it was more of the connection of, this is my music. I can escape to it. I can drive anywhere at any time. I mean, it feels quite a privilege to be able to say that, but I was very lucky, and I could kind of feel something about that. And it would have been anything. It could have been Prince. It could have been Madonna. But it was certainly the beginnings of me getting into electronic music. So I can remember one track, by Laurent Garnier, The Man with the Red Face, which is one of those stop you in your tracks kind of tunes anyway. And it comes in with that low rumble, and then there's a saxophone bit that starts to sort of creep in, and then you've got that mwah, mwah sound. And that, for me, is sort of synonymous with that feeling of freedom and, oh my God, I can do anything. I'm sort of leaving my familiar environment from home, but I've got this other familiar place, which is the car with the music that I love, that's going to sort of transport me onto the next chapter. And it's a really formative memory.
Wow, that's beautiful. I can relate to that, especially like the part of driving, and being by yourself, and also finding your own music. Yeah. I think that is something when you grow up with a specific type of music, and then you kind of like find something that is yours in that way. Yeah. It's like a different experience.
Yeah, it's a part of your finding your own independence, isn't it? From perhaps your biological or whichever family you grew up in. And then making your own way and realizing that actually it's okay to do this, and you know, they may not like it, but you do, and you will find your tribe.
Yeah, like I'm also like thinking about a story that a friend of mine told me about going to this meditation camp and like having a sound bath that kind of moved all the like that basically moved her blood to the point where she got nauseous because it was like a 10-hour.
I think it can be really interesting, those sort of environments. I mean, they are incredible. They're incredible to experience. I've also experienced a sound bath, but we are vibrating creatures. We vibrate as soon as we come, before we've even left the womb, but we're certainly vibrating as we come in. And there are neurons in your brain that will synchronize to the beat. And often that's a way of explaining that sort of felt sense that we sometimes feel, where we're like, oh, I feel really in harmony with this particular environment.
Yeah.
And it might be that that's because there's a synchronicity between you as a vibrating being and the environment you're in and the other people that you're meeting.
But are there then also certain sounds that are proven to be like healing for everyone and that are good for us in general, or like certain
There's lots of talk about certain frequencies. If we think about foundational rhythms, like heartbeats, for instance, at 80 BPM, if you imagine that most people will find that kind of calming. I think what's interesting is actually silence and bringing the decibels down for some people, if they're not used to that and it wasn't the environment they grew up in, that can also be unnerving because it's too quiet or too calm. So really, we're talking about an individual experience on a very nuanced level.
So a lot does have to do with the way that we grow up in the end.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and also we could go into transgenerational, effects across the generations. So you might have things passed on through ancestors that will have some kind of resonance with you that you're not even aware of.
True. Oh, wow.
We might need another whole other podcast. Yeah. So that's Shaquille, I can see your face.
But I'm just like, but everything you say makes, no, not at all. Everything that you say makes so much sense. And I'm just like linking it to all the things that I thought before we were talking and that you're saying now. What is the most fun part of your job? What do you like the most?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think when I am, God, make me choose one. It's like choosing children here.
You can say multiple things.
Well, I was going to say, I feel very privileged to be alongside people as they're going through a journey to understand their way of being in the world more, which is effectively how I think of psychotherapy. So it is a route to understanding. To sort of feel that with someone is, I always hasten to say it's not enjoy. I don't use the word enjoy, but there is something very sort of
satisfying.
Yeah, satisfying, I think, and I feel very privileged on that front. To be on the decks in a club with a dance floor, you love the track. The people dancing love the track. There's something happening in that environment that is very magical, and it feels like a kind of collective experience that is almost beyond words. But I'm sort of like, yes.
It's also beautiful to see someone who has found like really their multiple passions and a way to combine them. Yeah, because I think a lot of the times, I think a big part in life is finding something that you really like. Some people might take longer. Some people might know it from like when they're 6 years old. I always find that is really fascinating. And then being able to also do it is a whole other conversation, right? And you found multiple things that you're also able to combine. That's a really, really exciting thing.
Oh, I feel lucky.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about environments and if actually there are specific places that are better or more beneficial to listen to music.
It's really interesting. I'm fascinated by the effect of environment on our listening experience. It's partly what fuels the event that I just did actually at Kendall Mountain Festival. So I first of all set up a listening experience and I was DJing alongside a string ensemble in a regular venue. Then I was talking about how that might affect the listening experience and getting the audience to kind of tune in, if you like, by doing some breathing and grounding with them. To work out how they were feeling in that particular environment. And I really wanted to embody that experience. So put on a club night, which I would anyway, but it was a really good opportunity for people to get into their bodies and then see how that was different. I mean, I had no idea if people would buy into all, the 3 events that we did, but I just wanted to see if that really had an effect. And then the next morning we were by the lake in Kendal, which is Lake Windermere, which is absolutely stunning, in this beautiful museum, Windermere Jetty Museum, with a boat shed and Lake Windermere behind us and the ensemble and me DJing, and people were dancing on a Saturday morning before going wild swimming, which was incredible. I was talking about the effect of being in a different environment and listening within, say, a natural environment. So you've got bird song, you've got the sound of water, and that will have a specific effect on the way that you feel and the effect that that's having on your body and therefore your listening experience. So I think that's only the beginning. They were really visceral responses actually to listening in those 3 different environments, and I was fascinated by the feedback. So I think that's only the beginning of kind of thinking about the different environments that we listen in and the effect on us.
And what about environments that are even more intimate? Because that is also something with a lot of people that is quite like, a shared experience.
And a lot of distractions as well, and a lot of different sounds and noise. Yeah, I think we were talking about driving and being in a car, and I think that has its own sense of intimacy. And we feel really safe when we're driving. You are effectively in a bubble. And if you're driving on your own, it's a space to kind of let go,
be free.
to let your fantasies run wild, to dream, to sing, I think all of that we feel safe to experience whilst concentrating on driving, obviously. But I think music can only enhance that, and we know that from the way that we talked about it. It's actually that is a space that we feel safe to kind of be free and almost dream and kind of live out our fantasy. Yeah,
and like feel like we're in a music video or whatever it is.
It's often used in film, isn't it, as a place to sing wildly or kind of as a place to journey elsewhere. But I think those experiences, can be really profound. It's a place to be free.
Yeah, that's true. I a while ago, I lost my physical driver's license. Like I didn't lose it because I was speeding. I actually lost it.
Couldn't find it.
Exactly. In that time, like it took a long time to get a new one, like administrative wise. But then when I got it back and I drove for the first time by myself, like I think I drove to an event or something in the evening, and then it was dark when I went home. And I was like, oh my God, some people need like a mental health walk. I need like a mental health drive just to be by myself.
I think that's a really good point as well, actually, because if you come out of a club where there's an intense experience, it's actually quite, again, it can bring the central nervous system down and the autonomic nervous system and more into that state of rest, digest and relax. And obviously our fight or flight system is slightly activated when we're driving because obviously we're taking care. But I think as a way to bring yourself down in terms of the level of distraction that you might have experienced in a club, sounds like a really good way of doing it.
Yeah. Is there something specific that you think more people should know about the ways in which sound and music can affect our well-being or our body and mind?
I think it's not far from that collective experience, actually, and the idea that we might be able to use, and it sounds a bit trite to say music as medicine. I think actually music is prescribed on the NHS in the UK sometimes anyway.
Really?
But actually it feels like there is an untapped resource there and it might be something to do with the collective in that we start to feel like we belong more. And there's nothing really that we want more than to feel like we are connected in some way. And actually, music can be a route into that. When we start to feel isolated, start to feel on our own, think that it's only happening to us, we can become detached from ourselves, our community, and our bodies. And actually, there's a wealth of information available to us. I mean, quite often you'll hear people say, or I'll say to a client, how are you feeling? And I'll be like, I have no idea. I sort of don't even know how to answer that question. And so it can be a really long process of finding a shared language together to go, okay, well, what do you notice that's happening in your body and what might that be telling you about your experience in this moment? So to find a route back into the body can really give us a lot of information and be really helpful in the way that we kind of conduct ourselves in the world and the relationships that we can have. And music is a really good way of doing that, finding a way back into the body. I think that, for me, is sort of the way everything combines and the way I've been working.
It's beautiful that you said that, because I also, I've been reading a book where something like this was mentioned, but I've also, throughout my family, in different generations, I've noticed that, especially women, are often in a position where they're not always asked what they want or when they want it. So it's something when they are older and they're finding out oh, I have the freedom to choose whatever I want to choose. Sometimes they don't know how they feel. I'm on the opposite spectrum of I've always been asked how do you feel? What do you want? Maybe to an extent where it's sometimes too much.
Exactly. It can be too much. Absolutely.
Which I also feel is a little bit of a generational thing as well, in terms of now there's a lot of space and freedom to the amounts of jobs that are available and things that you can do, especially in the creative field. So there's a lot of possibility and options that can be on the other side of that, where you maybe overthink who you are and what you want to be.
We can definitely do that, overanalyze. Sometimes it's definitely necessary to pull back. But I think you're right, that kind of, there's an access point with music that allows us to kind of get back into the body and to just, allow us to a bit more freedom in working out how we might be in the world.
Is there a specific type of music that helps to relax, and what are ways in which we can incorporate that into our daily lives?
Well, lots of musicians are making music that's more healing, and interestingly, it's not as rhythmic as we might actually like to think. So you imagine it being really rhythmic and that's going to help me drift off. Actually, musicians are incorporating all kinds of different sounds, and that actually helps us eventually kind of calm down. So it's things like electronic sounds, textures, perhaps some unexpected sounds in there, and lots of geophony and biophony. So geophony is the sounds of the earth elements, so that's wind, rain, water, and then biophony are bird song and animal noises or whatever. And that actually can then, once blurred, create a kind of soundtrack that really does help us drift off. And it might be that we actually cut down the number of things we're doing. Yeah,
and isn't it also that sometimes it's good to just listen to the music and not do anything else? Because sometimes I feel like we listen to it while we do a million other things, or we're busy with something. But that's what I experience personally, is that sometimes it can be nice to, rarely we take the time, I think, to just listen to the music and sit or move and be in your own space maybe, and just do one thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. We often multitask, and music is one of those tasks, but actually rarely do we find ourselves, often with the time, but to give ourselves time to be able to float off to the music and be in a space where we can do that. And that might be really healing in terms of if we've had a really busy time at work or there's something really stressful happening, to know the music that can help you calm down might be really helpful.
Wonderful, really interesting. I'm also thinking about it now from a point of, I'm thinking I need a playlist of yours, actually.
Well, we can certainly do that, definitely. Yeah. And it might change every single day.
Yeah, wonderful.
There's so much music.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Oh, Shaquille, I hope I answered some of your questions.
You definitely did.
I could speak all day to you,
no,
so thank you. You
everything
really easy.
That you're saying, I'm like, ooh, this could open up a whole other topic and conversation, so I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.